Well, one of the reasons why um, the the homosexual agenda likes to compare itself with the black agenda, and that is insulting. It's very, I mean, to black so-called quote unquote black people who know themselves, it's very insulting when they try to make this kind of parody, and it's a legal loophole when the so-called homosexual agenda compares itself, to like the new black, like it so-called gay is the new black. That's what they're trying to make us believe. Um, but the homosexual so-called pseudo-gay agenda likes to compare itself with the black agenda because of a legal loophole. This kind of goes to the argument that we and others who understand the law have been making concerning artificial status, an artificial person and natural person. And they usually say it's a civil rights issue. And when they say it's a civil rights issue, you notice they did not make it a human rights issue, because if you say it's a human rights issue, even though since they've been having so much success with the civil rights thing, they are beginning to encroach upon the human rights thing. And it's very interesting, and you have to really observe this particular issue. It's a very crucial issue. But to answer the question that some have asked, like, well, why is it that they always try to, when you hear of the homosexuals campaigning for their issue, you understand, their belief, their faith, their religion, or whatever like that, they usually like to, or so-called pseudo-sexual orientation, they like to always say it's just like black people, we were just watching a couple of shows recently with this whole thing with Obama coming out about the gay issue, and I think that on that whole level, with Obama coming out, nothing else that he has done so far, I think, really pushes the grid, so to speak, as this particular homosexual issue. Because if you follow the trajectory of it for a while, he stayed in this evolving position. And there's a very legal reason why. I don't know what his personal thing is. I mean, I've heard a lot of kind of rumors, but the homosexual agenda always compares itself to the black issue, and it's what's more shocking and amazing that more black people haven't said, okay, hold up for a moment. We understand you're one, you don't want to be violated, like people to do violence and take your life and kill you, in a sense, seeing that we're living in this sort of country for constitution and so forth and so on. But when they compare it to a black civil rights issue, it's because it's a legal loophole. It's a legal loophole. And we say it's a legal loophole because the civil rights thing with black people is still based on the artificial status. All right? They don't say it's a civil liberties. Initially, they wasn't talking about a human rights issue. But more and more, you can see that the homosexual agenda, the new normal agenda, has been so successful in about 20 or so years that now they feel confident to take this to another level. And that's exactly what we're seeing, that is being taken to a whole other level. But as a so-called black, and I say so-called, just to limit this on a basic level, not to get into too much of the legality of it, it should be very insulting. But what we notice even more so is that a lot of so-called black folks have given up on the black issue, as though black people have already reached, so-called the mountaintop. So there's no longer a black issue. Now, a lot of the black folks, instead of defending black people's so-called humanity, a lot of these so-called black folks have jumped ship on the black issue and have gone over to the so-called homosexual agenda. So there's no longer a black power movement. So you can see that the black power and black liberation movement has been divided and conquered by a couple of issues. This is what we talked on the feminist issue. On the feminism, Rastafari and feminism. And then we did a vid on exposing the homosexual agenda in order to really point to the figures behind the scenes and their already stated agenda. They laid out basically their plans. They planned actually a planned psychological attack, and this has been done largely through media. And we often point out, like you recall when ones like the Ellen DeGeneres and other folks kind of came out back in like the 90s and everything, that this was all part of a big campaign. Now, it would not, that sort of issue is not an issue that many of us are really concerned with personally. However, where it does strike our interest is that they are trying to make a parody at law with black people. They're trying to say, for example, with the so-called same-sex marriage issue, saying it's the same thing as when a black man or a black woman and a white man or a black man and a white woman interracial. Trying to say it's the same thing as with the interracial marriages, where in American society that was illegal. And they're saying, well, just as it was illegal for interracial couples to get married, it's the same way as same-sex couples. And most idiots, and I have to say legal idiots, would say there's an issue there. But if you go to the heart of law, you will have to buck up on natural law. And when you buck up on natural law, the interesting thing you learn about natural law is that natural law is exactly what it says. It's speaking about nature and creation. And we all know that two men and two women by nature cannot procreate. So it's not a procreational alternative lifestyle. But really, in truth, according to even the Rastafari definition, it is a recreational. You understand? Some could say rectum creational, but let's not even go there. But it's a recreational, so-called lifestyle. And the next thing that connects with it now is this whole adoption issue. So they're saying that they want to get these legal rights as heterosexual couples do, so that they can be able to, like under federal law, so forth and so on, so they can be able to not just adopt children, which an individual can, but a couple cannot. So it's a slippery, and this is no pun intended, it's a very, very slippery slope. So when we have said to some of our fellows and sisters and brothers in the ministry, we said one should pray for Obama. And I really say this, and this is not because we're pro-Democrat or we're pro-Obama or whatnot like that, but first of all, because he's the one who is in power. The scriptures teach us in Timothy, 1 Timothy, I think it's chapter 2, to pray for, those in authority. Why? It says so that we may lead a peaceful life. You understand? And the stance that Obama took recently, I think, is very. It's it's a very, I'm not gonna say dangerous, but it is very dangerous. You know, it's a very dangerous stance on some. It heaven is even more insulted now than even before, because before the stance that the president took um, could be seen to be a legal stance, a legalistic stance, the whole thing about civil unions. But now the charge is to overturn so-called federal law. But it's not really just federal law that's at stake. It is natural law that is at stake. And with the particular momentum that this incites, it really begs the question, what next? And we're really coming into that particular changing laws and times prophecy. We're really getting into that territory, and it's a very, very dangerous territory. And it's not just from the legal American kind of perspective. This goes beyond. What I'm trying to say is this goes beyond America, and we should be insulted when they try to make a parody between the experience of a people who were taken into slavery and chattel slavery and subjected to all sorts of inhuman abuse, not just because of the complexion of their skin, but because of their race. You see what I'm saying? Because of their racial identity, trying to make a parody between racial oppression or downpression, which is a human rights violation, and a sexual preference, which they're trying to say it's not a matter of choice. So that's where the whole born this way argument comes in, because the born this way argument comes in to kind of segue into the natural law aspect. And still, it is very, very dangerous. It's a very, very dangerous area. So, yes, we should be insulted by it. And this is not so much out of any sort of hatred, but it's a matter of truth. You understand? It's a real, real matter of truth. And that's just some of my views on that for those who were interested in that. Like, why do the homosexuals always say it's like black people this, like civil rights act? Because that is a legal parody. You understand? That's a legal parody, because you have to remember that the civil rights case vis-a-vis black people in America is based on an artificial status. In other words, black Negroes, blacks, and coloreds, Smith, Jones, and Johnson, all that's artificial. That's artificial. So therefore, because of the 13th, 14th Amendment, so forth and so on, they are seeking to use that 13th, 14th Amendment there under civil rights to gain their rights and also sympathy. And I think it's a very dangerous. It's a very dangerous thing. I'm talking about dangerous thing in the sense for civil society, because every civilization that has gone this way, or has come up against to this point, that this society, and we're in the days like Rome and Greece basically right now, and it's not so much even thinking of the terrorists, or thinking of these threats that people think, but it really erodes the stability. It's like almost like a cancer in a sense. You know, on a certain level, based on legal principles, there's a case for the so-called homosexuals. You know, on a certain not to be violated, or you know, like one's taking their life because they are homosexuals in the case of American jurisprudence. But then to go so far as to deny the fact that 40 states have basically upheld the traditional definition of marriage. I don't even like that word traditional so much, but really the natural law. And by that natural law, it has become a tradition. But behind the natural law, behind the tradition is natural law, you know. And that's something that a lot of folks are not really privy to. They're not really aware of. And when the president came out as he did, whether it was playing to a constituent, a base, to solidify his base, to win re-election or whatnot, it sends a very bad signal, basically. And like I said, I can't really tell why he did what he did. You know, why he decided to, you know, come out, whether it was Biden saying what he said, and you know, all the bloggers and the chat on the internet was like, oh, he's evolving. But Biden says that, yeah, he's already there, but Obama is evolving. So Obama may be feeling that he has to come out and finally declare that he is for, you know, the so-called gay marriage, in the sense of changing the definition, that could lead to, basically, just not to say too much more on this particular subject matter, it could really lead to another civil war. I mean, it might not seem so right now, but it very well could lead to, because what they're saying is that, well, homosexual same-sex marriages should be brought up to the level of heterosexual marriages, when one is clearly procreational, and almost every, even homosexual, was brought about not by a homosexual union, but by some form of a heterosexual union. I mean, it defies logic, the push that's going on right now in particular. And it really tells us clearly what day and time we're living in, and we're living in the last days. So one needs to be awake and aware and to prepare. So that's basically all I got to say on that particular issue. All right? So I hope, you know, ones get the point. All right? Shalom.